Welcome to this episode of the People Dividend. I'm your host, Mike Horne, and today on the People Dividend, we're talking about something every leader, at least every leader I know, claims to care about, but that few actually operationalize. And that's developing people in a way that drives real business outcomes. And everyone in my audience knows that we talk about this extensively in terms of the people dividend. But joining me today is Dr. Shveta Miglani, and I am so delighted to be in conversation with her today because she is a global leader in organization development and executive coach and author of the recent book, Navigate Your Career. And we're going to dig into that and discuss it in depth. She's led learning and development at companies like Mike Horne, Salesforce, and Palo Alto Networks, and has trained thousands of professionals around the globe. Shveta, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm delighted.
It's such an important topic in terms of navigating your career. We're going to dig into AI and how AI is changing the world. But let's talk about you first, because I think that'll bring the story alive and why this topic is so dear to you and I know important to our audience. You've spent over 2 decades in in some very complex organizations in Silicon Valley and around the world. But I'm curious, before we dig into this, Dr. Miglani, what is it that drew you to the work of developing people and organizations in the first place?
Thanks for that question. I get that question a lot, and it gave me a pause to think about where it all started for me. And I actually grew up in India and decided at one point in time that I wanted to study further, but I wasn't sure what that could look like. So I decided to give my GRE and all the exams that students give to come to the US. And I joined a University of Kansas for a journalism course. And when somebody asked me why I joined it, I said, I love communicating, I love people, and I want stories to be heard. But soon enough, after joining the journalism course, I realized I don't think I'm the best person for this because you need to have a really thick skin you're not always going to get rosy, stories to write. You will have some tough things to write about. And most of the time, my professor taught me something. He said, you cannot be innovative. You have to write the way you see it. And that just killed my whole idea about being a journalist. So obviously, I started from a wrong notion there. And that's the time when I actually had a fantastic mentor in the School of Psychology, and I was doing a TA work for him. And he said, what drove you to this? What is that you're thinking about that you're good at? So when you think about it, he actually coached me to think about my skill set and what drove me in that direction. So as I peel the onion, I realized going back, it is the communication, storytelling, and the people side of it. And he said, have you thought about instructional technology? And coming from India 25 years ago, I had never heard about something like that. So glad got a chance to explore that, understand what that was, how we use cognitive psychology to design, to help people learn better, to create more layers on their learning. It was just fascinating, and the whole new world opened up for me. So decided to finish my master's in that and went through a transition of changing my colleges, changing cities, got my first job in actually Moscow, Idaho, then moved to Boise, Idaho, and then California. So as I look back in my life, there was always so many transitions. And I had to start from scratch. I had to build my own plans, my own direction. And I realized sitting and when I was managing onboarding and leading learning and development in these organizations, I realized organizations do so much to help newcomers through transition. But I also felt a huge onus of that is on people who are going through those transitions. So this book was designed with that in mind to talk about how do you take control of that? How do you make sure that you can plan for it? Of course, your organization will help you, but you've spent so much time finding that right position or getting promoted within your organization. How can you best plan it? That's where it all started with my own journey so many years ago. And my PhD work, I was able to use that research of the best in class people who have come before me, researchers who have come before me and talked about what works, how do peers help people assimilate better, what role does a manager play, what role the organization overall plays, and then what role do you play. So it's a story format, the book. Anybody who picks up, it's truly a playbook. It'll give you those ideas, those frameworks that you put into play. And even if you're not there yet, start planning now, because that promotion is just around the corner. So you need to plan for it.
Well, I love that, what you say, Dr. Miglani, in terms of it's just around the corner. It really relates to your theme of transitions. I was lucky enough to study with Bill Bridges, become certified in individuals in transition, organizations in transition. And it sounds like that early experience from the mentor at the university really helped you think through all of the transitions you had. I just finished some work for an Indian education company, and clearly things have come a long way. There are lots of instructional technologists
Yes, yes.
I was working with and instructional designers as I was putting together some curriculum for this company. I heard your story. I reflected also on one of the key lessons I learned from my high school journalism teacher who told me, and I think this may resonate with you as an author and as a writer and as a contributor to this field, that she taught me that good stories aren't written, they're rewritten. It's all about editing and moving forward. But so many great things. And as you moved to your PhD studies, as your doctoral studies, and worked on the topic of careers, what I heard in your statements was this three-legged stool approach, that career responsibility, the career development is the responsibility of the individual, it's the responsibility of someone's manager, and it's the responsibility of the organization. But I'm curious, now that you've been at it, out of school, celebrated author, now that you're out of it, thinking about those early roles that you had, what do you think leaders still miss today when it comes to career development? What are the things that leaders miss today?
Yeah. I think a lot of leaders are so focused on their day to day and getting their goals and KPIs met. And I don't blame them. Things are not easy. We think with automation, with AI, productivity is high, but I also think there's such a learning curve that so many leaders are going through. The most important piece I would say is a lot of companies, along with their leaders, are focused on attrition. They're focused on how do we make sure we, don't lose our people, which is good, but then they don't focus on transition. That's where I would say the leap needs to happen, where organizations need to focus more on how do we support these people in transition. And I've heard many leaders talk about this. As I was supporting leaders when they were hiring individuals or promoting people, they used to say, you know what, we don't need to handhold this person because they're super talented and they come from this organization or they've done this in the past, which is all great. But disorientation can happen to the best of us. And by that, what I mean is if you're not supporting your leaders or the new hires or people you've promoted internally during those transitions, you have missed the best opportunity. So I always tell leaders that I work with, you can hire the best people, you can promote the best people, but you need to sit down and guide them and coach them on what that transition looks like. So I'll give you a quick example. One of the people I was executive coaching is a leader in marketing. And she was really good. And the way she reached out to me, she said, you know what? Overnight, my boss left. And I was asked to step into that position, which is a dream come true. But then she said, these people who are my peers are now going to report to me. Suddenly, my clients internally and externally have changed. My relationship with my new boss now has changed. So we sat down and we discussed what that strategic plan could look like, what that transition could look like, especially creating a communication plan of how does she step in and help in communicating what her vision is and how do they build on the legacy. So these are things that people take for granted. And I don't think her organization also gave her that support, but kudos to her that she felt something was missing and she decided to work on it. And I don't think a lot of people sometimes even get that bandwidth of time to think through what do I need to work on, right? Everybody says, oh, we wanted to hire you yesterday. Talk about pressure, right? So I think that's a big missing piece from leaders' perspective, from organization perspective, which is help in transitions.
What I love about your story that you just described and about your authority and humanity that just exudes is that development is not HR, it's a business strategy. And that's clearly what I heard in the story of the marketing leader. And what you bring to this situation is exposure to scale and complexity. The ability for to think about the individual and scale from there. But you've written and spoken quite a bit about skills strategy as a CEO level issue and not as an HR initiative. That's a bold claim, I think, for many to make. So, what do you think most organizations get wrong about skills today?
There is so much out there on that question, Mike, because skills is something people believe in. It's like anybody you ask, any leader you say ask and have a discussion with, they'll say, yes, we believe in skills. We want to develop skills. But the commitment and the focus of designing that so that it actually starts at the ground level and it helps people to make wiser decisions is still not there. And by that I mean is at an organizational level, when a company goes from 500 people to 1,000 to 5,000 to 10,000, the growth is always good. But what happens to people who've been there 5 years, 6 years? And that's when retention gets very hard because what these people are looking for is what's next for me? How can I use my skills for that next level vision? And organizations don't have data. So when I think about skill strategy, I always think about yes, development, empathy from an organizational perspective, but also data is the most important currency for any skill strategy that needs to be built. And by that I mean is it's not just HR's role to say, let's design leadership development. That is amazing. But technical development, technical skills is another big piece of this equation that needs to come hand in hand and be designed with HR's guidance. And by that, I mean is sit down with your business leaders, help understand what are the most crucial jobs they have to hire for. Look at what the market has, and this is where talent intelligence comes into play. That market today has great data on what skills are required for today's job and tomorrow's job for specific jobs that are out there. So it could be job architecture that you're looking at, it could be different levels and layers in there. But work with your organizations, and I think that's where HR can help, is bringing that data in front of leaders and saying, in the last 3 years, this is how this job has changed. These are the emerging skills. Then help design pathways and career planning on those emerging skills. This is where HR plays a role, but it has to be a 50-50 partnership. And you have so many amazing platforms that can help you scale that idea. But the blueprint needs to start hand in hand with HR and the business leaders.
Well, that's fascinating, and I'm curious now from your experience, what separates the companies that actually execute versus just talk this game? What do you what exists out there that makes this separation? Uh,
The reality is the commitment comes with a budget. The commitment comes with resources. The commitment comes in saying, do I have this person, operations person, who's not only doing their day job, but also trying to manage the skills project? Or do I actually invest in hiring somebody who's a skills expert, right? That's where you actually give that accountability to your employees and leaders and say, we are being really good about this, investing in this. We are serious about this. That's the huge difference from any project, any programming that I've seen in companies who are serious about it. A lot of work is going behind job architecture, cleaning up the data, which is great. But employees are saying, if you're going to take so much time to help me with my career pathing, then I might as well jump the ship and go to an organization who understands how to do it, right? And who has results to do it. So we have to move fast. Organizations have to move fast because otherwise they will be lagging behind and lose their best talent.
yeah, so interesting. I mean, having led a number of career development initiatives in some very big and complex organizations with Bev Kay and her group and Catherine Matz and hands-on consulting, I think the difference that's always critical is, and it's something I'd like to hear you speak on, is the success seems to come when these are business led career development versus HR led. And I always found that transition a little wonky, despite supplying managers with some of the best. I love what you're saying about data, but let's think about it this way. If you were walking into a company tomorrow, and you may be, I mean, what's the first thing you'd fix in this regard?
The assessment will help to see most of the time the pattern that emerges is there were great online catalogs that were provided to employees, and the leaders were hoping the employees will actually go in, click on a learning catalog, and learn. And that usually doesn't happen. Our goal, this is something during my master's we were taught, the books are there. Somebody can pick up a book and say, you know what, I'm an expert now in leadership. But that doesn't happen. Our job is to create an environment, to create a culture where learning happens, where rewards happen for learning, and people see how they can apply what they're learning. So, for me, any organization I walk in, the reason they have me there is because that's not happening. And most of the time, that's the assessment that I come up to. That so much money was put into, getting a learning catalog and an LMS, but they don't see the consumption, they don't see the utilization. And that's where you have to say, what can we do to encourage? And I've spoken to so many leaders, and during my one on ones, they say, you guys are doing such a great job of building workshops and catalogs and this and that, but my people don't have time. How do we make sure they find enough time, not just to sit through a learning event, but also apply it and feel safe while applying what they've learned and get rewarded for it? So it is such a complicated process that people don't understand that just by, sharing a book or sharing an online catalog, learning just doesn't happen. So I would say if I walk into an organization tomorrow, this is what I'll end up finding. And my job would be to say is how do we create a strategy that brings people to learning, gives them time to learn, which things that they see they can apply, and it goes back to adult learning theory, right? If I don't see an application for this concept or that topic, then I'm not going to be motivated to learn. So that's where business comes in really big to say leadership is important for us. How do you negotiate is important from us from a sales perspective. So let's prioritize that topic. Let's help you make time for it and let's work on it together. So that's where organizations play a big part and business leaders help to make those decisions.
There's so much truth in what you say, Dr. Miglani, in terms of assessment. I have some prospects that often want to skip assessment and go straight to solutions. Or I have companies, clients that say they're willing to do diagnosis, and survey says, and then they want to jump straight to, again, some sort of implementation. This idea of assessment is so critical, I think, in the work that we all do in organization development. And it's one that we cannot short change. And when I think about navigate your career and the book, it really does put responsibility onto individuals in organizations. And as I think about my work today, and I particularly think about the young people that I'm engaged with in education, what does it really mean to take ownership of your career today?
First and foremost is get your head out of your desk. I feel like a lot of people, especially culturally, I can speak to myself, coming from a culture where we were told, just do your job and don't look around. And I don't think that works in today's environment. You need to know who are the people you're working with? Where does your output become an input for the organization? How are your goals attached to the larger business that you're working on? It still surprises me when I talk to a lot of people where they go like, I didn't even realize who for instance, my third level VP was. And it surprises me because I feel like you should know that. You should understand which organization you're part of. What does your business do? How does your work relate? Because tomorrow, when things change pretty quickly, then you don't want to be sidelined. You want to be ahead of the curve. And that's why I feel like making sure you understand how does your role make a difference in the organization? What is part of your business? And a lot of, like you have mentioned early, companies are complex. There are diverse portfolios happening. So I'm not saying drink water from the water fountain, but understand enough to say, yes, I understand how my skill set and my job adds value to the bottom line of the company. And you can do that by stakeholder management, understanding who your stakeholders are, understanding what your business is, understanding what resources you have. Companies spend so much money on giving you resources on your fingertips, right? Read a document, read about the earnings call about your organization. Now, I'll be honest with you, Mike, when I started my career, nobody taught me this. It's only through the years that you realize this is important for the work that I do. And I wish somebody had said that to me early on. So I tell students who are graduating and transitioning into the corporate world. I've worked with several universities, George Mason, and many, many others. And I always say, learn about the organization. That's your best bet. And that's the best way you can see how your skills differentiate from the 500 other people who are interviewing from the same position. And that's the market we are in right now. It's competitive.
Yeah, so true. And I just want to, before we wrap, I do have one substantive question. And then I want to talk a little bit more about how people get in touch with you and learn more about your work. But you're working at the intersection of AI, learning, and leadership. And as you said, it's not just about a catalog, it's not about having a great LMS. So I'm curious now. I mean, how is AI changing, in your view, the way that people develop, not just how they work, but how they develop? What do you think's going on there?
I think we all love the crutch that we have called ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude. There are so many out there. And critical thinking, I think, is missing these days. And I see that with teenagers. I see that starting from an education pipeline all the way to work. And a lot of people take pride in that, saying it's productivity. Look how quickly I came up with this answer. It isn't bad, absolutely. There are times and days you have to use it. But where I think learning is getting lost is somebody will say, "Oh, I'm getting ready for a one-on-one. What are the three things I should focus on?" Great, you will get that job aid pretty quickly. But then you're using it as a crutch. You're not embedding that in your leadership style. You're not embedding that and practice it in the long run. Now, the best scenario of AI usage would be write to AI, I'm having this really tough conversation. Give me the 5 points that I can go in. Take those 5 points and practice and practice and practice. And learning is all about practice. My father used to say, if you don't write and learn, then you're not learning. It's not going in your head. If you're just reading something but don't come back and summarize it, you're not reinforcing it. So these are the cognitive things that we can do to continue learning by using the best tools that we have in our hands, and AI being such a big part of that. But I would say encourage people, yes, move faster, but make sure it gets embedded in your brain and in your habits on a regular basis.
Boy, so true. I noticed that as a teacher, student papers have never been better. Over the last couple of years, in particular, things are perfectly formatted APA, and I have major questions about learning. But how do people get in touch with you, Dr. Miglani? What's the best way to get in touch with you? How would our audience get in touch with you to explore your work and learn more?
Thank you for that question. I love hearing feedback and inputs from my readers around the world and people who want to work with me. So best way to get in touch with me is my LinkedIn account. I am pretty quick in response. I have my website. It is shvetamiglani.com. Really simple, my full name there. And you'll find more information there. And if you want to email me, shvetamiglani@gmail.com, that's another easy way to get in touch with me.
Oh, that's absolutely terrific. I mean, there's so much to this conversation, to the work that you're doing, to the value that you're adding, not only to individuals and teams, but to organizations. And I think it would be a real privilege, a real great connection for members of my audience who are interested in these topics around learning and development and AI to be in touch with you. So I would endorse that connection. If you had one thing to wrap up or summarize our conversation, one way to help my audience in navigating this complex world that we've discussed, what would that be?
I would say if your audience is listening to the podcast, that means they are motivated to learn, they want to improve themselves, and they want to take charge of their own career. So continue doing that, continue planning. We'll have ups and downs in your career like we all do, but you will learn from it. So, one thing I say is plan. Try to make sure you understand your skills, how to get better, and where the market is going.
Wow, that's super. That's a great way to think about everything. I have really appreciated our conversation. You've worked with thousands of leaders across the world. You have done so much to help so many. So thank you so much for being in conversation with me today on the People Dividend. And I just thank you. And once again, Dr. Shveta Miglani. Be sure to contact her on LinkedIn or through her website, which is her first name and surname.com. You'll find more about her there. So until the next episode of the People Dividend, everyone stay well. Thank you.